Thank you, Ray. Now, I didn't ask ahead of time how to pronounce this gorgeous lady's surname, so sorry in advance. So we have Robyn Rooschuz, who's a digital information specialist with over 15 years industry experience with structures, BIM and information management. She's currently undertaking the role of digital information specialist for Digital Guerrilla. Yep. And working with project teams providing training and support for coordination, collaboration and delivery of BIM projects. And without further ado, take the stage, Robyn. Thank you.
Okay. Just adjust that down. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Okay. Right. Okay, so I am Robyn Rooschuz. I'm going to be talking to you today about COBie. Please don't all leave. I promise this isn't going to be overly technical at all. My goal today is to try and simplify COBie. Right, so a little bit about me. I don't like specifically talking about myself, so I'll talk a bit more about Digital Guerrilla, where I work just now. We're a growing BIM consultancy based in Scotland, and among other services, we provide information management for projects across the UK. Like I said, my goal today is to try and simplify COBie a little bit and raise awareness for some of the issues that we come across on our projects regularly. So, what is COBie? I'm sure most of you will have seen a definition similar to this. This is the NBS official definition. Proprietary data format for the publication of a subset of building information models, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but what does that actually mean to us in the industry? So my definition would be COBie is a structured data format. It's data within maintainable assets in the BIM models that can be used to support the in-use phase of the built asset. This data can be used within the CAFM systems to work with facility management and to help manage the project through the O&Ms. My fellow speaker Alice will be speaking a bit more about the facilities management side of things after me, so I'm not going to touch too much on that. So, how do we get there? What does COBie actually need from us? Well, there's only three things that COBie really needs. It needs to be defined, it needs to be structured, and it needs to be validated. So I'm going to expand on a few of those now. So if we look at who is defining the information, it's the appointing parties. They need to tell us, really preferably in the organizational information requirements, the OIR stage, what data they're looking for. This then comes through into the project information requirements, the asset information requirements, which eventually comes out in the exchange information requirements to the team at the tender stage. Then we have the other side of it, the people inputting that data. So this is the design team and contractor. But how do we get those two sides to talk to each other? This is where information manager comes in. So we have information management on the client side, and we have information manager from the design team side of it, from the project team. So I'm going to go into these a little bit more just now. At the end of the day, what we're trying to get is for us all to work together as a team and to get asset management team working on the CAFM system with the data that we're putting through the models. Okay. Right, so defining COBie. We know what COBie is. We know what responsibilities and what we're trying to achieve for that project, but why is defining the requirements so important? COBie requirements need to be defined to ensure that the data is useful to and usable by the client. It all comes from the client. It needs to be able to support the operation of the built asset. So let's see how that can be done. Well, the appointing party needs to understand what their maintainable assets are. Now, my emphasis here is on maintainable. The assets need to be serviced, repaired, replaced throughout the lifetime of the building. We want to focus on the assets that are going to be monitored through the CAFM system. There's absolutely no value in defining elements within the model that don't require maintenance. Every client will have their own requirements. There is no one size fits all. We've said that a few times today. But just to give you a bit of a start, I know you can't read them, but Table 102 and Table 101 in the NBIMs gives you a full list of information that you do not need to ask for COBie. So it's a good starting point for those who are interested to have a look. In there is things like stairs, steel, piles, walls, elements that typically don't need maintenance. Next, the appointing party needs to consider what data they require for each asset. Now, we'll look at the COBie fields in a minute. I'll bring up an example spreadsheet. But data needs to be useful. It needs to be relevant for the assets that need to be maintained. Now, I'll give you, there's no value, again, in asking for each asset, as it adds time and cost to the project team to gather and input the data. It adds time and cost for the validation side of things, and it provides no extra value for the facilities management team. So to give you an idea of what I mean by this, the total number of COBie fields that can be input per asset is 101. I counted this using the tabs type, component, system, assembly, connection, and attribute tabs only. There are other tabs as well. So if you multiply that 101 parameters per asset that can be asked for by the number of maintainable assets in your building, you can understand how much information that could generate. And you need to really consider the value of that information versus the time that it takes to manage that and put that in. Lastly, and probably most importantly, the appointing party needs to have a plan in place for how their data is going to be managed after handover. They need to define for themselves how the data is going to be kept up to date once the asset is handed over. Records of any new or replaced equipment needs to be managed, otherwise the data will not remain up to date or accurate, and it completely loses its value. Having a defined purpose for using the data will help in determining how data is mapped between the model and the facilities management system before handover. To give you an idea of what this can look like, this is template 4, the FM data mapping requirement, developed by Scottish Futures Trust and part of the standard information management plan that's being used on a lot of projects in Scotland currently. Okay, so now we know what data is required for, what assets, and how it's going to be used. How do we structure that information? So it's the project team's responsibility to input the data, and it needs to be structured in a certain way to be compliant. Now, as with everything BIM, there's a standard for that. This is the previous standard. This is the standard we have been using, BS 1192.4. The new standard, ISO 19650.4 2022, was released at the end of last month. I haven't got my copy yet, but once we do, we'll be combing through it with a fine-tooth comb. The general structural rules for COBie were noted in clause 6.3.1 in the BS 1192, and these are things we need to be aware of. As well as the standard side of things, we need to understand the overall structure of COBie. So, as promised, I'm going to be showing you a COBie slide, COBie spreadsheet. So, this is what the first page of the COBie schema looks like. As you can see at the bottom, highlighted in red there, these are your tabs relating to the facility attributes, its systems, assets, spaces, and so on. You can also see that the tabs are colored. These colors relate to the type of information requirements. So in this example, you've got yellow and green, which would be required and requirable. The black tabs are not required at all in this example. So if we have a look at one of the example tabs in this spreadsheet, this is the type tab in all its glory. I know the text is too small to read, but it's more to show you the color side of things. Again, we have yellow, which is required. We have orange, which references or picked lists. Purple, which are external references usually populated by the authoring software. And green, again, which is requirable data, so the client can ask for that data. Okay, so we've had a look at a brief look at the standard, a brief look at the structure. Now we're going to have a look at the schema itself. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit more technical, so I've tried to use a lot of images to get my point across. So, this is my version of the COBie structure diagram. Every single thing in COBie is linked. As you can see, contact surrounds everything, and including facility. Every single tab has contact information in. It's the created by and it's the created on information, as well as some email addresses in the other ones. We'll go through that in a little bit later. Type and component are also linked to all the other tabs, and I'll show you an example of what I mean. So this is an example of the floor tab. COBie floors refer to levels in the BIM model. The first column of the sheet, the floor name, is what's called a primary key. This primary key is required to be referenced on the other sheets. So in the example shown, I've pulled up the space tab. Spaces, again, refer to architectural rooms and MEP spaces in COBie. And we can see that the data from the primary key, the floor name, is present in the COBie space tab under floor name. This shows us what level each room or space is located in the model. We'll go a step further with the same example. So we're still looking at that same space tab we were looking at a second ago. The first column, again, space name, is the primary key, which is referenced in the component tab under space. This gives us the location data of each asset, which room or space it is in the building. Now, we need to understand that this data in the COBie spreadsheet itself is not intelligent. Yes, it all comes from the model, which is intelligent, but there's no formulas linking the COBie spreadsheet tabs together. So it's really important for the project team entering this data to ensure that it is correct and to identify any issues with the assets that they may not have identified in the model itself. To give you an idea on how many links there are between the COBie tabs, here is a more granular version of the COBie structure. You might recognize this from Graham's presentation earlier. It just gives you an idea of all of the links between the tabs. Mostly we used on the projects that we have been information managers on. It's not all of the tabs for COBie. So just to give you an idea of how complex those connections can be. Right, so validating COBie. We're now aware of the structure that needs to be followed. We can have a look at the validation side of things. So the COBie schema needs to be validated at the end of each stage to ensure that the data is complete and compliant with the project requirements, what the appointing party defined in the very beginning. This is usually done by an information manager on the project before handing over to the appointing party's information manager for review. We'll have a look at these roles just now. So, role of a client information manager. This can be a suitably qualified and experienced person within the appointing party's organization, or a third party specifically appointed for the project. The role of the client information manager is to work with the client to help them understand their data requirements and communicate those requirements to the project team through the asset information requirements and exchange information requirements we discussed earlier. Validating the received deliverables against these requirements. It is imperative that each client and sometimes each project has their own bespoke data requirements, as one size does not fit all. From the project side of things, we have the project information manager. Again, the information manager can be a suitably qualified and experienced person identified by the lead appointed party or a third party appointed to support the project team. Project information managers can assist the project team to understand the appointing party's requirement and assist the development of the BEP and associated templates and provide support and validation of the data throughout the project. On our projects, where the client or project side, Digital Guerrilla tends to provide a great deal of support for the project team, providing free training, guidance documents, template, export settings, classification settings, everything the team needs to be able to work together in a collaborative and uniform way to produce the required deliverables. Validating the data at the end of each stage and providing useful reports that clearly identify any errors and help keep the team on track throughout the project. We put a lot of emphasis on supporting the team to get it through. But what is the role of the delivery team in validation? So just as task teams run their own coordination to ensure that their models are clash-free, could task teams maybe do a little bit of their own validation before sharing? So there's a growing number of add-ins and software out there that make this possible. I'm going to have go over a quick overview of the QC Reporter. This is a free application. I am not being paid in any way. It's a free application that can be used to help validate your own data, and it's one that we use ourselves as well. It's devised by Bill East organization, and for those of you who may not know, he is the father of COBie. So the QC Reporter is a very simple file that runs using Java. You simply select the files that you wish to review in that first tab, select your phase and any rules that need to be considered, and select the location where you want to save it to, and then you click Run. That's all there is to it. Once you've run the QC reporter, an HTML file is produced listing all the COBie tabs reviewed and any warnings or errors. Now, I know, again, that text is really small, but it is just a list of each one of the tabs, your warning count, and your error count. So it's giving you an idea of what your data looks like. The status of each tab is summarized, and that's a summary, again, probably too small to read. And error by row is identified. So that's what that is showing you there. All of those numbers in blue are the row in the COBie schema that the problem is. So this could look a little daunting if we don't understand how to read it. So what this error is saying is that there is an issue in the Systems tab, System Component Names Cross-Reference, related to the data cross-reference, and a component names column in the rows below. So let's take it step by step. If we go to the Systems tab in COBie, and we find the component names column, which I've highlighted there, and check that against the component tab and the name column. And this brings us back again to that primary key that I was discussing earlier and how important the structure is. The error is identifying that the component names in the System tab are not present in the primary key of the component tab. So this check doesn't take long to run at all. It takes a couple of minutes max, and it's not resource hungry, it's free, and it could really help teams identify and correct simple errors themselves before sharing their information. Okay, so summarize time. In order for COBie to be achieved, and in order for it to be valuable and effective and useful, COBie needs to be clearly defined by the appointing party. It needs to be understood by the delivery team and structured in a compliant way. And it needs to be validated to ensure that data is complete and compliant with the project requirements. So thank you very much. That's everything from me.